Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Rashmi Sinha from Indira Gandhi National Open University. Today we are going to talk on module Sheldon and Parnell classification of somatotype from the paper Human Growth, Development and Nutrition. Now our learning objectives of this module will be this: you will come to know about the history and earlier classification of somatotypes and the development of Sheldon's classification. You will also be able to comprehend the M4 deviation of Richard Parnell factors which affects somatotyping and further works after Sheldon and Parnell. Somatotypes refer to outermost morphological forms of human bodies whose classification is based on appearance, characteristic and changes according to physical constitution, environment, disease, nutrition and exercise. Somatotypical studies have contributed to our understanding of diversity of human builds and been applied to specific diseases, osteoporosis, relations between musculoskeletal system and aging, exercise programs for individual athletes and potentials of athletes. In fact, Sheldon developed the idea of somatotype in his search to find the relationship between human physique and behavior. Somatotypes are affected by the environmental factors such as occupation, nutrition, housing, medical support, and lack of primary health medicine. They are important in our daily life for their useful application in industries of electronics and clothes as well as anthropology, bioengineering, medicine and sports. Experts of medicine, philosophy and psychology found that human somatotypes were related to personality or physical characteristics and classified somatotypes into various forms. This study explored the changes and types of somatotyping methods from before Christ to present day and identified the status of studies of somatotypes in area of physical therapy. This study covered the methods applied in various subjects with the focus on those provided in books and papers of Heath and Carter. Based on results, there are officially 12 assessment methods. Currently, the method of Heath and Carter is widely applied. Somatotypes are studied in many areas. It is actively explored in the area of pain physical therapy, thermotherapy, and integumentary physical therapy. Also, the soft tissue physical therapy area seeks interdisciplinary studies. Somatotype is an important concept in human growth. Let us now learn about the history and earlier classification of somatotypes. Somatotyping, as we all understand, is the most recent development in the 25th century history of morphological taxonomy and constitutional investigation. The foundation of the classification of human physique started way back in 5th century BC by Hippocrates, who divided somatotypes into habitus physicus and habitus apoplexicus. The former refers to long and thin body builds which are vulnerable to tuberculosis, and the latter is short and fat body fluids which are more exposed to blood vessel diseases and strokes. Celsus, an editor of Roman Medical Encyclopedia in the 1st century AD, wrote that it was necessary to learn about the nature of constitution in order to understand why a certain person was thin while others were not. Galen, a Greek doctor in the 2nd century AD, maintained the theory of 4 types of humors and said we needed to know patient's humor constitution for diagnosis, treatment of disease. In the 4th century BC, Aristotle said specific bodies had specific characteristics. In the early 11th century, an Arabic doctor and philosopher, Avicenna, recommended the study of temperament as it is related to character. Typological system based on Hippocrates' pattern was famous in France between the 18th century and the early 19th century. In 1797 and 1828, Halley and Rostand respectively described the three physical constitutions covering type digestif, type musculaire, and type cerebrale. John Sigismund Elsholtz at University of Padua in the 17th century first used anthropometry in the studies of morphology. Later, in about 1880, Hutter divided them into cerebral, muscular, and digestive type. Kretschmer, who was a German psychologist, divided somatotype into leptosome habitus, athletic habitus, and pycnic habitus. His types are similar to the Giviano grouping, in which the gradual change from psychose to normality are recognized. Leptosome habitus was a type where height is long but bone and muscle development is poor, corresponding to introvert people. Athletic habitus stands between pycnic habitus and leptosome, referring to body type of narrow shoulders and large muscle bones. Pycnic habitus is small in height. They have narrow shoulder and thick bodies. Obese type is merry, sociable, and extrovert people. Dating back to the times of Cesare Lombroso, there have been numerous attempts to study about physique and the different methods measuring physique. Some of these measurements have been simple, while the others have been complex. For instance, Ernest Houghton separated height and weight into 3 into 3 matrix or 9 subgroups to see if there was a relationship between physique and crime. Height was identified as short, medium and tall, and weight was identified as slender, medium and heavy. This example outlines a simple method for determination of physique of a person. A more complex method of determining physique can be found in the work of Ernst Kretschmer. By the year 1800, a host of physics studies were completed in Europe, and it was Kretschmer who completed one of the paramount studies of physics. Originally published in 1831, his study of physique and character comprised of 400 patients of all ages and different occupation in a hospital. This study was conducted in an effort to link physique and character. The key contribution of his work was to physical determination was that he established the three types of physique: the asthenic, athletic, and pycnic forms. A person could have characteristics from each of the Kretschmer's type, building for a blended physical type. According to him, the extreme asthenic type is characterized as weak and frail, and the person with this type of physique has deficiency in thickness combined with an average unlessened length. The extreme athletic type of physique is recognized by strong development of skeleton, the musculature, and also the skin. The extreme pycnic type of physique is characterized by the pronounced peripheral development of the body cavities and a predisposition to distribution of fat around the trunk region with more refined structure of the motor apparatus. William Sheldon and his somatotypes, they are of great significance in this type of a study. Sheldon graduated from University of Chicago with the PhD in psychology and with an MD. He held positions as professor. William Sheldon had a significant role in describing the somatotypes. He introduced the term and concept of somatotype in his book The Varieties of Human Physique, which was published in 1940. As the three basic elements determining the body builds, he focused on intestines generated from embryological endomorphy, bones and muscle developed from mesomorphy, and the skin, sensual organs and nervous development from endomorphy, and combined them to classify into few categories. Sheldon's endomorphy, mesomorphy, and ectomorphy are similar to Kretschmer's pycnic habitus, athletic habitus, and leptosome habitus respectively. Now let's see the Sheldon's classification of somatotype. You can see also the figure and understand it. Sheldon recognized that every individual, instead of being a particular type, was a mixture of all the three basic components of physique: the endomorphy, mesomorphy, and ectomorphy. What is endomorphy? According to Sheldon, endomorphy type means virtual preponderance of soft roundedness all over the various regions of human body. When endomorphy is dominant, the digestive viscera are massive and tend to relatively dominate the bodily economy. The digestive viscera are derived principally from endodermal embryonic layer, and as a result, the people with thick fat layers have bone structures developed from endomorphy. This type of people are round and fat in shape. What is mesomorphy? This means the virtual preponderance of body muscles, bone, and connective tissue. The mesomorphic physique is normally heavy, hard, and rectangular in outline. In mesomorphy, bone and muscle are predominant and the skin is made thick by heavy underlying connective tissue. The entire bodily economy is relatively dominated by tissues derived from the mesodermal embryonic layer. These types of people are muscular and robust with bone structure developed from mesomorphy. In case of ectomorphy, there is a relative preponderance of linearity and fragility. In proportion to mass, the ectomorph has greatest surface area and hence relatively the greatest sensory exposure to outside world and largest brain and central nervous system. In a sense, therefore, his bodily economy is relatively dominated by tissues derived from ectodermal embryonic layer. The ectomorphic type of people are thin and have bone structures developed from ectomorphy from their birth. Sheldon stated that the somatotype is a trajectory along which an individual under average nutritional condition and absence of major illness is destined to travel. He used the word morphophenotype to refer to the present physique and morphogenotype to the genetically determined physique. Sheldon further said that somatotype does not change throughout a person's life. In his work, The Varieties of Human Physique, he wrote that the problem of somatotyping is to discover objective anthropometric correlates for the subjective discriminable aspects. Sheldon chose an arbitrary scale that permitted no rating more than 7 or less than 1 in any component. Sheldon used somatotype photographs, the record of the present height and weight, a table somatotype distributed by the cube root of weight and arthroscopy. Here you can see how Sheldon's objective method, how he is trying to evaluate the somatotype. Sheldon in 1940 summarized his photoscopic method, which he called anthropometric somatotypes method, as follows. Calculation of height-weight ratio, which he called as HWR, calculation ratios of 17 transverse measurements taken for photograph negatives to stature. The transverse measurements selected from factor analysis of 32 measurements were 4 on the head and neck, 3 on thoracic trunk, 3 on arms, 3 on abdominal trunk, and 4 on the legs. Inspection of the somatotype photograph referring to a table of known somatotypes distributed against the criteria of HWR, comparing the photograph with file of correctly somatotyped photographs and recording of estimated somatotypes. Comparison of 17 transverse measurement ratios with the range of scores for each ratio to give a final score. However, Sheldon was persistently criticized because the somatotypes does change. They are not objective. There are 2, not 3 primary components for endomorphy and ectomorphy, which are essentially inverse of each other, and somatotypic omits the factor of size. In order to meet these criticisms and negative reactions provided by his somatotype system, as he had described it in his work in The Varieties of Human Physique and in the Atlas of Men, Sheldon described a new trunk index method. Now here you can see areas to measure when determining trunk index. The trunk index somatotypes is calculated from the data. The trunk index obtained from planimetry of standard somatotype photographs. Maximal and minimum weight and stature reported by the subject. Table of HWRs and trunk indices, a table of somatotypes plotted against maximal stature. Basic tables for somatotyping which combine the trunk index, maximal stature and SPI, that is the somatotyping ponderal index, which is the lowest ponderal index on record. The tables are corrected for age and are read differently for men and women. Nothing is said about the using them for children or subjects shorter than 137 centimeters for males and 120 centimeters for females. Those classified based on this system will have 3-digit body shape numbers. The first to third digits related to endomorphy to ectomorphy order, and each digit has a scale ranging from 1 to 7. The sum of the three components may range from 7 to 15. Higher number relates to more definite classification. For example, extreme endomorphy type is displayed as 711. In this, the first digit 7 is the degree of endomorphy, while the second and the third digits 1 and 1 refer to degrees of mesomorphy and ectomorphy. If someone pertains to the extreme endomorphy type and shows little mesomorphy but medium level of endomorphy, it will be 714. Therefore, 171 and 117 will stand for extreme mesomorphy and endomorphy respectively. While the classification numbers are mutually exclusive correlation, if one class provides a higher mark, there will be no higher marks in the other classes. Actually, the extreme forms such as 711, 171 and 117 are rare, or you can call it non-existent, and normal builds will be near 444. Drawing directly from the work of Kretschmer, Sheldon delineated the study of physique and dimensions of somatotype. According to Sheldon's theory, it was found that it is impossible to determine physical distinctions amongst human beings. He also focused on 3 extreme physical types adapted from embryology, which corresponded approximately to Kretschmer's physical typology. The endomorphs were pycnic, mesomorphs athletic, ectomorphs were designated as aesthetic. These 3 types were selected because they illustrated the most extreme cases of physique. Sheldon and his colleagues further defined endomorphy as the relative predominance of soft roundedness throughout the various regions of body. Mesomorphy, on the other hand, was referred to the relative predominance of muscle, bone and connective tissue, and ectomorphy to the relative predominance of linearity and fragility. Sheldon noted that this form had the largest brain and central nervous system. He examined 400 male undergraduate students at the University of Chicago to redefine his measurement. In an effort to standardize his method, Standard took photographs of naked subjects from 3 angles, the front view, side and the back view, where the subjects stood on a pedestal a certain distance away from the camera. From 400 subjects, 4,000 photographs were collected and examined. A total of 17 measurements were taken from body of these photographs. From this, a 3-number scale was derived to conclude a person's somatotype. The first number in the score reflects the endomorphy in the individual, second the mesomorphy, and the third represented the ectomorphy. Thus, an extreme endomorph would receive a score of 711, mesomorph would receive 171, and extreme ectomorph would receive a score of 117. In 1949, for the first time, Sheldon tested his methods of somatotyping in studying crime. He followed the lives of sample of 200 young men from social service agency called the Hayden Goodwill Inn. The sample consisted of youth with antisocial personalities as well as delinquent histories, which gave Sheldon's study a comparison group of non-criminals on which to base his results. Although he examined many different sociological variables as well as biological variables, the main finding among the criminal sample in terms of somatotype was that of mesomorphy was the most common somatotype. Therefore, Sheldon concluded that delinquents were more inclined to being mesomorphically built. With the exception of a 30-year follow-up study, this would also mark the last time that Sheldon's method of somatotyping would be used in the study of the link between physique and crime. In the 30-year follow-up Sheldon's research, Hart re-examined the 200 men above whose biographies were presented by Sheldon. One of their major findings was that future adult criminals differed from non-criminal subjects in the sample in terms of mesomorphy. Let's learn about Richard Parnell, how he described the somatotypes. His work inevitably eclipsed Sheldon's somatotyping approach. He described a method known as Parnell's M4 deviation chart method to objectively somatotype human subjects by physical anthropometry. Therefore, Parnell's method of somatotyping was considered to be more objective as compared to that of the Sheldon. Parnell remarked that phenotype is the body as it appears at a particular point of time. Because of this, Parnell indicated that his method for somatotyping was not good variable for prediction purposes. Parnell labeled his physical types on the chart as fat, muscularity, and linearity, which correspond to the classification of Sheldon's endomorph, mesomorph, and ectomorph respectively. Parnell developed the scoring method to use anthropometric measurements and recorded the results in M4 deviation chart to use them along with the pictures. Parnell's method of somatotyping requires height, weight, and measures of muscle girth from biceps and calf, femoral and humeral epicondylar diameters, and skinfold thicknesses at triceps, subscapular, and suprailiac. The M4 deviation chart included tables to obtain anthropometric somatotypes. We can see figure also the assessment of fat muscularity and linearity were obtained to the nearest point on 7 scale, giving phenotypes similar to Sheldon's phenotype. Parnell replaced Sheldon's component name with fat, muscular, and thin type and abbreviated as F, M, and L respectively. The fat, the endomorphic type, decision is based on skinfold measurements, while the muscular type mesomorphy work is based on height, bone diameter, and limb thickness. The thin type, the ectomorphic type, work is based on HWRs. As shown in M4 deviation charts for adults, the 3-element scales were collected from the various brackets. This method of somatotyping emphasized the phenotype, not the somatotype. You can see here the Parnell's M4 adult deviation chart. It shows the values for the Harpenden chart for determining the somatotype. This skinfold caliper inserted for the chart is based on Parnell's determination of endomorphy estimate. Parnell's effort was to describe a short physical anthropometric method for obtaining with the following purpose: to provide objective guidance on the dominance of somatotype components in a healthy person. To estimate the Sheldonian somatotype objectively and as accurately at least as the agreement achieved between experts in photoscopic somatotyping. Also, to make an estimate of women's somatotype possible, although in the absence of a published reference somatotype data estimate cannot be compared, and to reduce on cost, labor, and time while doing somatotypes. There was work done after Sheldon and Parnell also. Stimulated by the works of Sheldon and Parnell on somatotyping, Eleanor Glueck, with the help of Sheldon, conducted an analysis on the relationship between physique and crime. The Gluecks compared the physique between a sample of delinquent and sample of non-delinquents. They took the help of physical anthropologists to measure the somatotypes of their subject. It was Parnell's method of somatotyping that was used to study physique of individuals in the Gluck sample. The Glucks merely interpreted the results. He concluded that mesomorphy was more predominant among the delinquents, while the control group of non-delinquents contained no preponderance of any single somatotype. Besides the Gluck study, two other studies utilized Parnell's somatotyping procedure. Juan Cortes and Flores Gutti examined the relationship between a person's physique and the need for achievement or motivation. They examined 100 delinquent youths and a comparison groups of 100 non-delinquents in a high school. In both groups, a significant and positive relationship was found between mesomorphy and motivation. They also found that a significant but negative relationship existed between ectomorphy and motivation. Cortes and Gutti concluded that a relationship existed between mesomorphs and the desire to achieve. The association between the physique and height of an individual was mentioned in time after time in literature. Even Sheldon foretold the importance of height and weight in measuring somatotypes, noting that with height-weight norms, it will be possible to create a scale of height-weight measures for each different somatotype. The body mass index is derived from a person's height and weight, and it is used to measure the total body fat. According to BMI, a person who is endomorph receives BMI score of 26 and above. A person who is mesomorph will receive the BMI score between 19 and 25, and a person who is ectomorph will receive a score of less than 19. To test the reliability of BMI measure, Madden and his colleagues took Sheldon's original sample data from the varieties of delinquent youth and compared the result of Sheldon's somatotyping technique with the same sample using BMI scale to determine the individual somatotype. The bivariate correlation analysis that were completed to measure the relationship between the two types of somatotype measures showed a strong relationship between Sheldon's method of somatotyping and BMI measure. These analyses indicate that BMI is a reliable source of somatotyping. Factors which affect somatotypes. Now let us see what are the factors that influence the somatotype. They are the age, nutrition, smoking habits, physical performance, high altitude, occupation, and genetic factors. Tissues with somatotype studies in the criminology. There are several limitations to the research on somatotype and criminality, primarily due to the stigma that has been related to conducting research on the link between biological causes of crime in the past. It has been noted that Sheldon's method of somatotyping was very time-consuming and expensive. It took 3 to 4 months to compare the data gathered from the 3 different pictures of each subject. This time did not include the time it would take to analyze the data with other data in the study. In the case of criminology, delinquency, social and other structural variables. Also, due to the time period in criminological development, little data could be collected on females. Third, the study on the link between crime and biology in general and somatotyping specifically is that the results are either mixed or weak. The final and maybe the most important limitation of somatotypic research before 2008 was the technique that had to be used to measure somatotypes. The main drawback of Sheldon's method of somatotyping was because Sheldon's procedure and reformulations of his method required not only subjects be naked but also that quite a lot of pictures were taken of the naked subjects. Thank you.